Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, June 20th, 2023, and I would like to ask that everybody could introduce themselves, and I'll start. I am co-chair Vanessa Jenkins.
John Pacheco, co-chair, council member for District 5 now. They changed us.
Anita Arena Davis, I live in North Minneapolis.
Edward McDonald, Washington County, City of Oakdale.
Kristen Stacy, City of Hopkins.
Jen Kostrzewski, Environmental Analyst, Environmental Services Division. Andrea Kaufman, Workforce and Equity Coordinator in the Workforce and Equity Team in Environmental Services.
Jana Larson, Senior Outreach Coordinator in Environmental Services.
Tony Carter, Metropolitan Council District 14, St. Paul, Central and West Side.
I'm Michael Luceni, City of Plymouth.
Thank you.
Cy Jordan, Director of the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity.
Tori Hampton, Equity Officer, the Office of Equity and Opportunity at the Council.
Hello, Wheelie, Enterprise Equity Senior Manager.
Naomi Shapir, Equity Consultant, OEO.
Selena Martinez, Senior Manager of Equity and Inclusion and Metro Transit.
And Zacharias Ailu, I'm a new Assistant Director, OEO.
Thank you all. Approval of agenda. First order of business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing no discussion, then all in favor of adopting the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
All right, we have at this point just inform folks that we don't have a quorum today, so we won't be taking actions for approval. Quite frankly, we have about 21 members. Our attendance has been lacking. We're going to remind people of it. We had hardly any say they're going to be here tonight. And I'm actually, as council member, going to meet with Chair Zelli about the numbers itself. We have potential 21 members, so we need 11 as quorum. It's been tough. I don't know, this is only my maybe 5th month here, but I haven't seen where we're even close to the 11 that we need necessary. So we're sending out a notice now to all the folks who are currently members, but may or may not have been attending for whatever reason, and to re-establish their interest. And if so, we'll see move forward. We'll be adding other members, hopefully here. We do have 4 now council members, 2 new council members, so that's where our attendance is at now. And so the new member is Tony Carter. She's already introduced herself. And Chai Lee has been on here for a while now. And Yassine Yasmin is going to be our 4th member. And so that's our makeup today. But again, hopefully we'll have increased members so we can really take some action on some items as we go forward. We can make recommendations to move things forward. So as we hear presentations, if there's issues that we could take that we want to move forward, we can definitely do that through one of our members here to the full board. All right. Next is just a notice of public invitation. Now you know that these are all taped or live, and so we do have some members who are watching and going back to us. We provide opportunities for anybody who coming to wish to speak, just as we do as the council members. You're allowed 3 minutes to speak on issues. At the full council, I think we established that it has to be something that was on a previous meeting notice, but we don't speak to an item that's on the agenda that evening. So if you want to present something prior to the meeting, make sure you get at least one meeting before that. But again, we do allow time for for public to speak. So at this point, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the agenda. We did have on the agenda, it's been on the agenda, and it goes to the same subject, reports of subcommittees. We haven't had enough members to have subcommittees. We've been taking things, as you'll see tonight, like from the environmental or from other departments within the council and to the body here. But right now, we don't have that. And again, on another note, we as the council members are being asked to look at some advisories as well. There's some advisories coming up in the environment. I'm on one of my committees is obviously the equity committee, but there's a development committee. There's some other ones that we're going to be getting local folks to participate in. So there'll be some more information on that coming up. At this point, according to our agenda, we do have a presentation from the Water Alliance Equity Network. And so please introduce yourselves and the subject itself.
Yes, sure thing, Mr. Co-Chair. My name is Jana Kostrzewski. I'm an environmental analyst with the Environmental Services Division. I use pronouns she, her. Andrea Kaufman, also pronouns she, her, coordinator in the Workforce and Equity Department in Environmental Services.
Jana Larson, also she, her pronouns, and I'm the outreach coordinator for environmental services.
Mr. Co-Chair, do you have the slide advancer button for the controls? We don't have the controls right now.
But I think Greg is supporting it.
Oh, so would you say next slide? Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think he's coming in.
Okay. I guess we'll get started. So we're excited to come and talk with you all about an opportunity that Environmental Services is participating in. Thank you. It's an opportunity that is with the U.S. Water Alliance, and it's called the Equity Network. I'm going to see if it works.
So suspenseful.
I know. It's like, oh, all right, there we go. Hit it 5 times and it will advance. Okay. So, but before we get started talking about the program specifics, I do want to go over some goals for today because this is the first time that we've come to you all. And so we figure it's a time for us to meet one another, develop rapport, make sure that we are building the foundations of a relationship that we hope to check back in with over the course of this year and the course of this program that we're going to be sharing with you about. It's also an opportunity to introduce what Environmental Services does as a division, just so that we can be clear about where our constraints are as a division and what work we can and cannot do based on statute, and how that can apply, again, as to how we can participate in this program with the U.S. Water Alliance. And then lastly, discuss the alignment with our programs, our abilities to work within the region, and the intent of this program that is sponsored by the Alliance. So to take a step back, we live in a water-rich region. Water is everywhere. And the 3 main ways that our residents tend to interact with water, and seeing Co-Chair Pacheco is drinking water right now, is through our water supplies. There's waters all around. Hopefully we all stay hydrated. It's important for us all. And it's because of our local water suppliers that this resource comes to our residents so that we can hydrate and stay hopefully healthy. The other way that water is abundant in our region is through our rivers, lakes, and streams. Our 7 counties actually have over 1,000 lakes. We have 3 major rivers, and we have over 1,000 segments of streams that connect to those rivers. Not all regions are as fortunate as us. And so this is a blessing that we need to make sure that we are preparing for, planning for, and making sure that we keep these waters around and in quality so that our residents can interact with them without having health concerns. And then lastly, again, an experience that we all do experience with water is through our wastewater. And whether you are on a community system that eventually does connect to our regional system, or if you are a resident more in the rural areas of our region and having your own septic system, dealing with wastewater and the conveyance of wastewater from our bathrooms to some sort of treatment facility is an experience that is common for all of the residents. And it's those three areas that environmental services helps connect with the residents in our region. We have water planning services, so we aren't a water supplier. We don't actually have a utility that provides water to our residents, but we help our local water supplying utilities plan for the region because we all use the same aquifers or rivers as our water source. So we help plan for that. We plan for our water resources or our stormwater management on the landscape. And so that's another role that environmental services has. And then lastly, we operate the regional wastewater system. And I know some of our colleagues came recently to talk to you about our I&I system. That was a big part of our regional wastewater system. So those are our three roles. And even though I've talked about water in three different ways and three different silos, if you will, within environmental services, on the landscape, we may have separated systems, but it's all the same water. And so that's the way that we think about water in the region, is that it's a connected system. And while my group may focus on water resources planning, that water will eventually go into some local water suppliers' intake. It will go through some residents' faucet. They will use it, and then it will be returned to some sort of wastewater system. So that water doesn't really have a system that it stays with. It flows between all of those different systems. And so that's a framework that's important for all of us to keep in mind when we're talking about water within the region. So, like I said, water has no boundaries. It's all connected. And so just to be clear, I just wanted to spell out the different ways that we do serve the region. So we do wastewater collection and treatment. We do wastewater planning, so we want to make sure that that regional system has the capacity for the growth that we hope that our region has so that we maintain our prosperity. We make sure that we do some water quality planning, so that's both monitoring our surface waters. It's hard to plan for waters if you don't know what the quality of them are. And also thinking about watershed planning, so just what different approaches can we take to keep our watersheds healthy, and how can we maintain that livability that we all enjoy within our region. And then lastly, like I mentioned, we do water supply planning, and the major lever that our supply planning group has is we do offer efficiency grants to our communities to try and have our communities be a little bit more efficient and conserve water so that we're not over pumping or overdrawing our aquifers. We want to make sure, again, that resource is managed in an appropriate way. When we do talk about our wastewater system, this is a map that we're quite proud of. So it's a slide that we try to have in many of our ES presentations. We just want to be clear that when we are talking about who our customers are from this system, that there are 111 communities. When we're talking about our water planning services, we do have over 186 communities that we help serve with our water planning services. In general, we have 2.7 million people connected to our regional wastewater systems. That is a lot of toilets, or people. We won't say every individual has a toilet, they're families. All of that does flow to our 9 wastewater treatment plants throughout the region. You can see the different colored areas on the maps are what we call sewer sheds. So all of the different wastewater generated in that area will flow to a treatment plant. The largest one that we are currently sitting in is the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant sewer shed. So that's that giant green patch that ranges from lower South Anoka County all the way down to where we are in St. Paul. Oh, sorry, I do want to make one more comment on this. We have this system that we do invest in, and this is going to be important when we talk about the U.S. Water Alliance program. We don't just have this regional system, we maintain this regional system and we make investments into this system, which means we make financial investments into the region. And so it's something to keep in mind as we talk about this program and where we can perhaps make connections with. So I want to say, on average, it's $150 million per year through our capital program that we're making investments through. So that was the map from the wastewater side. This is a map I want to share that is a little bit more in my wheelhouse. So these are my partners that I deal with on the daily. These are the water management organizations or watershed districts. It's a level of governance that's unique to the metropolitan area. And so it's a way of thinking about water instead of by community boundaries or county boundaries, which is how we tend to operate in other ways. We think about water in the way that water would typically flow. So these watersheds, which is if a drop of water fell onto a parcel of land, it would drain to a river, lake, or stream. That area of land that drains to that river, lake, or stream is what's called a watershed. And so it's a really, I would say very smart way, I might be biased, of how to manage water is to manage water the way it flows. And so we have 33 districts or organizations within the metro that their sole purpose is to work on water quality and water management for their residents. And that in turn helps us manage the waters within the region. So they're a little bit closer on the local perspective, and we help them with regional issues that are important from a water management perspective. Also within my group, we have a big stakeholder group of local water suppliers. I mentioned before, we do not supply water. We partner with our local suppliers. There are over 105 of them. They tend to be run and operated by communities, so it's usually a community-led utility, not always. But on this map, the communities that are colored in, I'm gonna call it teal. I know we all see color differently, but I see it as teal, are communities that have a public water supply. So that means that the city that is colored blue either pumps groundwater or pulls water out of the Mississippi, or does some combination of the two to provide water to their residents after treatment and making sure that all the water quality standards are met. The communities colored in gray are areas that don't have community supply, but there are still people who live there. So those are the folks we need to keep in mind that have their own private water supply. So that's where they have their well and they operate it, and that has additional responsibilities for those wells because those individuals then are responsible for the water quality coming out of their wells. The Department of Health does offer programs to help them monitor it, but it is on the individual to make sure that they are monitoring the water quality that they are drinking. Something to consider as we continue to talk about these things. All of these different areas that I just mentioned, all of these different concepts that we discussed are planned for in the Water Resources Policy Plan. The one I have on screen is our current one. It's the Thrive 2040 plan. The intent of that plan and the intent of the 2050 Water Resources Policy Plan is very similar. We help to guide the orderly and economic development of the region, thinking about wastewater systems and where our regional system can help with growth in the region, and then also making sure that we have that capacity to continue to grow. So infrastructure tends to have long-term planning horizons. Like we think about infrastructure in centuries because some of the infrastructure we use right now on our system is over 100 years old. So we hope to continue to maintain that and build on that system. Our second purpose of the Water Resources Policy Plan is to protect public health and water quality. And so we do that through our wastewater treatment and then also some of the different planning that we do with those partners that I was talking about beforehand. The 2050 plan, this is why it's really good timing because we're in the process right now of developing all of our different 2050 regional plans, which may sound like we're going to be writing a plan for the year 2050, but really what that means is that we are going to adopt this plan in the year 2025 to send us on the right trajectory to have the vision we want for the region in 2050. So while it might think we're coming to talk to you about this plan that's way, way out in the future, like this actually is happening soon, and it's really important to get your input on some of these things. Another thing I know our colleagues have come to speak to you about is the equity framework that's also embodied in this 2050 regional policy plan. So I'm asking you to hold a lot of things in mind as we continue to talk about this program, but it's all interconnected and really important. And I hope that we'll be able to connect all those dots as we continue this. If we don't, please call us out on it. The one thing I do want to mention, I know you've had other divisions come or other staff come. The one thing that I want to say that everyone wants to be unique. And in some situations, environmental services really is unique from other divisions at the council. We do have our own statutes and governing agencies. So we have The Pollution Control Agency is one of our regulators to make sure that we are treating our wastewater in compliance with state laws. We also have statutory obligations to serve the region through wastewater, water supply, and water resources management and planning. Our funding is different for environmental services. Majority of, or all of ES's budget comes from our communities that are attached from the regional wastewater system. So their ability to pay for the wastewater system is what funds all of environmental services work that we do. We do not accept, we currently do not have any federal funding helping with the work we do. And so that also has some uniqueness with how we go about doing our work. So there's some statutes tied to where our funding come from and where we can spend our money. Primarily that is to ensure that our customers are getting a good deal. And we do have customers, which is something also that's pretty unique to environmental services and Metro Transit, is that we run these operational wings that have customers. And it's something we need to keep in mind that as a utility, we have to serve our customers and make sure that we provide a level of service that they expect. And then lastly, and this is where we are a little bit unique for sure, is that we are three things at once. We are a planning agency for waters within the region. We are an operational agency in which we run this regional wastewater system. And then lastly, we are a regulator. And so we regulate some of the folks that send us industrial waste or waste to our wastewater system. So we wear three different hats at once. And sometimes that can be both a benefit, or can be a benefit, but also it can be a little confusing when we're talking about who we are as environmental services. So we wanted to be clear about that up front, that there are various roles that environmental services can come to the region to work with them on water. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Andrea so she can talk to you about this program that I've been alluding to. And by Andrea, I mean Jana. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just have a couple of quick questions. And one is, you said we have customers. Now, do we actually sell the water?
We sell access to the wastewater system. We are a wholesaler for our wastewater services. So we don't work with residents, we work with communities that connect to our system, and they in turn sell access to wastewater to their residents.
I'm going to follow up with that because either I read it or someone had told me that we actually provide water for these folks.
No, we do not. We do not have a water supply role. We only plan for water supply.
The second one real quick is, we made a lot of, there was a lot of information regarding the viral load and how that's now being measured, and we have a partnership with the University of Minnesota or something like that. Hey, are you going to talk a little bit about that?
We are not speaking to that tonight, but we can provide resources on that.
Can you explain a little bit about it?
I cannot.
I can do enough to be dangerous,
okay.
But I'm willing to be dangerous. So we were contacted by the Department of Health during the COVID pandemic to try and identify where different viral loads were coming in from our community. And so we tested, when you're at a wastewater treatment plant, there's the big interceptor that comes in, so it has the mix of all of the different wastewater coming from those big blobs on that map. So the big green blob, let's just say. All of that influent gets mixed through our interceptor system and comes to the treatment plant. We took a sample from that influence and started measuring what the viral loads were. So we had a partnership. This is where we can get you the information. I can't speak to all of this, but we took a sample from our influent. We were able to track the viral load, and so that was giving us and the health department a heads up of how many viruses were I don't actually, this is where, I'm sorry. The viral load was coming into the treatment plant, and so we were able to watch those peaks and valleys as the Department of Health was also seeing similar patterns in how the community was testing with COVID virus. And so it was a very successful partnership. It allowed us to forecast, and allowed the Department of Health to forecast what was happening within the region, because not everyone was being tested. But like I was saying, hopefully everyone was using a bathroom. And so that gave us a little insight into what was happening in those dynamics.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you want, again, if you want more details, we can
No,
get you.
I'm fine for now, yes.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned your funding creates a uniqueness around yours. Give me an example of what that is.
Do you want to?
Sure, yeah, so, and this ties in with, Co-Chair Pacheco, what you were saying around our role as a wholesaler versus, a direct seller to individuals, in that because our customers are like cities and municipalities, right? We're working in that wholesaler way, and individuals aren't buying through us. It presents a unique difficulty in offering like pricing programs. It's not impossible.
Right.
It's just another hurdle to get through.
Sure.
So when we're thinking about the piece that we'll get through with the Water Equity Network, all of the roles that we can play as this utility planning and regulating agency, that's something to keep in mind, right? It's like there are these areas where it's the push and pull, where it's not easy to do something like that, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And the easier opportunity is, let's work with the cities, and what kind of work can we do with the cities to get there?
Okay.
That hopefully answered, or were you
Yeah.
more interested in like the funding we're taking in?
No.
Okay.
That's perfect, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that kind of alluded to my question, was like if utilities does go up in a city, that would be tied to your guys' recommendations, or how does that work with?
No, so every year we establish what the rate of service, like depending on the amount of wastewater that is generated by a community and comes into our system, there is a calculation that back calculates how much they should help offset the cost of maintenance of the system. So there's this ongoing fee that communities pay every year. They get that bill and then they decide how to pass that on to their residents, that cost. In addition, if it is a community that has a water supply, so I live in Minneapolis, there's a sewer fee that the region has for the regional system. There is a component that the city of Minneapolis, because they have their own wastewater system that they operate, and that eventually does connect to the regional system, and there's operations and maintenance costs associated with that system. And they have a drinking water supply utility. All of those three components go into what I see as my water bill. And we can't tell communities how much they charge their residents for those services, but we do have good relationships with those communities to start thinking about different ways that they might be able to just reframe their billing structures. And I will say some of our communities are actually pretty far ahead in this as well. So when we say partners, it's us learning from them and them learning from us. Yeah, those are very good questions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So we have this amazing opportunity to join the Water Equity Network with the U.S. Water Alliance. So we're fairly new, and Jen, Andrea, and I are kind of leading this effort in ES, leading the team in ES. And so we just want to walk through sort of what is this, why are we doing it, how does the EAC fit into it, and things. So first of all, I have what is the U.S. Water Alliance? So Water Equity Network. It's a member-supported national nonprofit water organization that connects resources and capacities of multiple people and organizations in order to advance equitable water management. So the network is comprised of wastewater utilities, drinking water utilities, arts organizations, philanthropic organizations, environmental groups, organizations serving historically marginalized communities, and more. And it's a community of practice. All of these organizations work together to advance equitable water management practices at the local, state, and national levels. And there are learning teams within the organization that get coaching and support from U.S. Water Alliance staff. So these are the cities where there are members of the network. So it's about 35 cities in the U.S. currently have members in the Equity Network, and it's about 20 states. I tried to just count from the map. I didn't see the actual statistics there. And so these groups were working together to address what the U.S. Water Alliance is calling pressing water equity challenges. And they've identified several, so I'll just run through the water challenges that they consider a priority. The first is aging and inadequate water structure or infrastructure. Much of our nation's water infrastructure was built over a century ago, as somebody, I think Jen talked about earlier, and it's in desperate need of repair. People estimate that upgrading the deteriorating water system will cost about $1 trillion over the next 20 years. In some places, there's also a lack of infrastructure. Some areas do not have centralized water and wastewater systems. Water affordability is another pressing challenge. The rates that as Jen was just saying, the rates that utilities charge their customers is the primary funding source for most utilities, and costs keep going up. Labor, materials, debt service, those costs keep going up. And so the rates keep going up. And while water and wastewater service is generally affordable for most Americans, the lowest 20% of earners pay almost 1/5 of their monthly household income for water services. So it is a pressing challenge. Fragmentation is another challenge that they've identified. And this is mostly in rural areas. There are very small systems that have a serious cost burden. Water quality is another big challenge. Access to water is not enough. That water must be safe and clean enough for human consumption. And in some parts of the country, drinking water is contaminated with heavy metals, agricultural or industrial runoff, and untreated wastewater. Climate impacts are another big challenge that's emerging. Climate change threatens water systems that were designed for conditions that no longer exist, notably predictable snow and rainfall patterns. So impacts from extreme storms overwhelm our existing infrastructure frequently. We've all seen those images on the news. And changing temperatures are increasing the frequency, unpredictability, and destructive force of fires, hurricanes, and rainstorms. As utilities struggle to fund maintenance of existing infrastructure, they must also redesign system capacity to meet the changing climate. So climate impacts, in other words, are an important challenge. Flooding, related to that, is flooding. Flooding is a challenge for many communities across the country. Urban flooding happens when shifting precipitation patterns overwhelm our existing infrastructure. Sometimes that's insufficient stormwater infrastructure, storm drains and storm system. And vulnerable communities are often heavily impacted by flooding because they are more likely to live in risk areas and lack the resources and infrastructure to prepare for and recover from storms. As flooding damages homes, it discourages economic development in the area and creates public health risks. There's also siting of hazardous facilities and land use in low-income neighborhoods and communities of color, which create public health disparities. The Water Equity Network gives an example of a low-income neighborhood in Camden City, New Jersey, that is the site for a wastewater treatment plant, a solid waste facility, multiple factories, 2 Superfund sites, and 28 contaminated sites, all within 1 square mile.
That's not Phillips? No.
Camden City, New Jersey. I mean, I'm not saying that's not Phillips, but that's not the example that they used. So, as we all know, hazardous sites and land use often pose water threats for vulnerable communities through compromised drinking water, risk of contamination during floods, and ambient pollution from wastewater treatment facilities. And finally, sorry, this is just going on and on here, but the last water equity challenge is public participation. You guys are all here, but the ecosystem of water governance is complex. Multiple agencies hold responsibilities for different issues and pieces of the infrastructure. The subject matter is technical, and decision-making processes can have long time horizons. So this makes meaningful public participation in decision-making and governance difficult. Language barriers can be an issue, as meetings are often conducted only in English. There's little technical support or training for people interested in running for and serving on water boards or citizen advisory councils. And in some places, owning property is a requirement for running or even voting in a water board election. In addition, some vulnerable populations have been systematically disenfranchised and excluded from policymaking throughout American history. These past experiences affect how communities view and interact with the government agencies today. High-profile incidents like the Flint water crisis exacerbate underlying distrust that vulnerable communities feel toward the government, and it can take decades to regain public trust once it has been compromised. So those are the possible water equity challenges that we can address or work to address with the U.S. Water Alliance. So why join this water equity network? Yeah.
A couple of things you didn't address is that we haven't really thought about our drought possibilities. And as the weather gets warmer, how it affects the water for growth of algae and bacteria.
That's a good point, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Getting it down quick. So why join the Water Equity Network? Well, it's as participants, we are engaged in implementing a range of equitable policies such as, sort of the other agencies, the other members of the network are engaged in implementing a lot of different programs that we can learn from them, such as affordability programs, climate resilience planning, workforce development strategies, community benefit programs and policies, community engagement, internal racial equity programs, and more. So the U.S. Water Alliance not only provides tools, resources, and strategic guidance to Water Equity Network participants, but they also connect us to other agencies who are doing innovative work around the country. We also have trainings, office hours, matchmaking and mentoring where we can team up with similar agencies, etc. So, how does this, let's see. The first step we are taking as a team is to look at what the U.S. Water Alliance is calling the 3 pillars of water equity. And they would like us to sort of choose an emphasis based on either pillar 1, pillar 2, or pillar 3. So the first pillar is really focused on ensuring that all people have access to clean, safe, affordable water service. And the main focuses in pillar 1 are focusing on affordability, focusing on access to infrastructure, and focusing on water quality issues. The second pillar is about maximizing the community and economic benefits of water infrastructure investments. So that's kind of referring to those capital program dollars that we spend in the region. And really in the focus areas of pillar 2 are workforce development, contracting and procurement, and using those funds for some of those funds for neighborhood revitalization. And then the third pillar is fostering community resilience in the face of a changing climate. And the sort of focus areas of pillar 3 are planning and assessment, funding, and project delivery. So we haven't chosen which pillar we're going to focus on, or 1 or 2 pillars, but that will be sort of the first way that we will focus our work in the Water Equity Network. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ann.
Yeah. I think that ties back perfectly to what you brought up, committee member, before around, is there a pillar or two that it makes more sense to pursue given the way we are positioned, right? So pillar one, there are drawbacks and opportunities with each one, right? So what's the value of each one and how do we maximize what we're gonna do and how do we bring in more voices to deciding what we're gonna do? Because it cannot be just the three of us. It cannot just be us and our bosses. It cannot be just ES thinking about it, right? And so, part of why we're here today too, right, is starting that process. And in that sense that because of the way our organization is structured, some of these items we can impact really directly, some a little indirectly. So one example being with pillar one, going on the affordability, and because you've heard about the I&I private grant program, there's also the public inflow and infiltration program. Might there be some sort of connection or leveraging in a respectful, healthy way, leveraging that can happen with affordability and then the availability to cities for more public I&I funding if they're also being considerate of affordability for individuals, right? Like how does that all fit together and work together? So I will keep going. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, so how are we gonna do this? We're gonna think about ourselves a little bit differently, actually quite differently. So one of the tenets that comes with participation in the U.S. Water Alliance in the water equity network is this concept of serving as an anchor institution. And we have anchor institutions in our communities. They're public service entities like hospitals, universities, utilities that are tied to a specific location, often due to infrastructure and mission. So these institutions are providing critical services, vital assets to improve economy, the health, the environment, well-being in a community. They might also be providing opportunities for active civic engagement and participating or adding to public life and really the vibrancy or lack thereof of the community that they're situated within. So for ES, this would be a really new way of thinking about ourselves as an anchor institution, and not just an anchor institution, but an anchor institution in the way you see on the slide, in this really positive way that we are situated to bring value to the community, to be a community partner, to find those opportunities to co-create, to benefit, to listen, to do what community members and community groups are wanting and have been asking for and need. So pretty different for us, pretty excited for it. Here's a little bit more about this, referred to as like new paradigm for us of being an anchor institution. 5 sort of areas within that, and I apologize that this is so painfully small, even on my screen. But in short, this is about how an anchor institution creates value in the community that it serves, and I think that's really important to think about too, is it's in the community it serves, and really about being in service to the community, not the other way around, right? And that not taking from the community, but really like it's there for people to provide jobs, to add to the economic health and wellness of a community. Another section on here is what Jana was talking around the multi-benefit investment. So this piece I get really excited about. Utilities are creating investment policies, programs, and practices that achieve community benefits. So where we're hoping to take that private I&I program that you've heard of in the past is an example of that. It's not there yet, but it's on its way to being something like that. And there's so many more opportunities. And of course, environmental and public health enhancement. And then I missed one, convening and collaboration. And again, this is a different way for us in ES, I say ES, Environmental Services Division, to think about not only what we do, but how we do it. And it really changes everything for us. It changes who are we listening to, who's making decisions, how do we make decisions, where we go with the work. And part of being with the Water Equity Network that we're so looking forward to is that there are some really incredible groups around the country who have been doing just like phenomenal things. I think of like Louisville, and they have this awesome community benefit department where they have like this whole department that's about community benefit, and it includes procurement, and anytime they have a contractor in doing large infrastructure work, there is a voluntary request that contractor do something specific to support the community, either by committing to hiring a certain percentage of workers from a specific zip code or range or radius around the area, and or making a donation to a nonprofit in that area for a specific program that has been community chosen and driven. But there's like a third one also. It's like, whoa, that is unlike anything. Right? It's just unlike anything we've done before or way we've thought of, I think, a utility like this. So sorry, I will keep going. I'm very excited about this. Okay, so why are we here? We would love for you to go with us on this journey. And we are learning. We are in the very beginning of it. And we want everyone to come along with us if you're willing, and to help us learn and learn with us, and to give us grace when we stumble, and to challenge us when we should do more. Ask questions to help us work together to do what we need to do and do what's right and what our community members want. So again, we wanted to come early in this, like it is very early in us working on this. We have a committee internally that is based on a prescriptive list of roles that the U.S. Water Alliance gave us. We're starting to expand that because it is a pretty narrow group. We need to start doing outreach and building community partnerships in this way. We already have municipality partnerships, watershed partnerships, but we're certainly lacking in neighborhood partnerships, individual cultural community partnerships, individual people, just real people who care about water, use water, right? I'd love to go to the park, and this will happen at some point, right? And just ask all the kids there, like, tell me what your favorite thing is about water. And just start to get that framing and that picture going of what we need. So not only your perspectives as individuals, but as the communities that you're here representing as well. What you're hearing from residents and neighbors with their concerns related to water. And it might not be something, again, that we directly influence or have control, or it might not be something we directly have control over, but it might be something that fits in that influence sphere. And then would love your help proposing and identifying community organizations that we could reach out to see if they'd be interested in building relationships with us. So our next steps, we will be back if you will have us. So we as staff will continue learning and digging into this and figuring out what this can be and look like, and getting our colleagues to all drink the Kool-Aid and
Fresh water.
All the fresh water, I'm sorry. Fresh, clean, crisp water, tap water.
We might have to go to Kool-Aid. The way things are going.
Yes. But we really would love, if you're interested, to have you along with us for this, and to be coming back and working together, and would like to know also from you what that looks like for this group, and if that's something you're open to.
Mr. Chair, just had a couple questions. What is the intersection between this group and the Great Lakes Compact?
Good question.
I mean, I'm not trying to be heady here, but I mean, it's a pretty interesting body that's challenged in a lot of ways, with climate being what it is and the international need for fresh water, and we're sitting like on the biggest swath of all of that. And in a lot of communities, a lot that's happening in places like Flint and Detroit and Milwaukee and Chicago and other places, it's all about the water and how close you can get to the water. Gentrification is occurring and communities are being displaced because of fear of access to that water.
Yeah.
You know, we have this beautiful thing here, now we have all these lakes and it's all kind of dispersed, and we also have Superior sitting right up there, and I saw a news report where somebody started to pump the water to make bottled water and sell it, and they had to stop the person from doing it. But I guess that the compact, I mean, how does this intersect with that? And then I have other questions, because there's so many pressing things right now. The PFAS issue is just really huge and scary to a lot of folks, including me, because I live right next door to 3M, and you know, I've seen our water towers change, and I hear about the wells being shut down in Woodbury, and then climate. There's been no real grassroots efforts to allow for the genius of our neighborhoods and communities, the grassroots folks, to chime in on water matters, mitigation, as well as adaptation. I mean, the answers are really in there. I like where you're going with this is fine, but to me, there's two big pieces here. You got this, there's the Great Lake Compact, and then a void of real grassroots voices around what the concerns are in neighborhoods, from lead laterals to PFAS to costs, just a whole bunch of things that are there. So, I mean, I like this idea, and I think bringing people together like this is really good. I would not be opposed to that, but how do we make sure that when we go to the table, we can tie in a system where we are really hearing from communities, and I guess those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony?
And you may have responses to that. I can hold it there.
I am woefully ignorant about the compact, so I'm not gonna speak on that. I don't know. Jen?
Dangerous. I was gonna say, like, I'm actually gonna be, I will get back to you on that. Let me check some facts before I actually say anything, so.
Yeah, I think it's critical because they are really driving the water policy right now.
Yeah, I will also say an opportunity that I'm looking forward to that's happening in July through the U.S. Water Alliance Equity Network is we are part of the Great Lakes Region Planning Group, and so we are all going to be flying to Chicago to meet up with our colleagues within the Great Lakes to hear what Detroit and Cleveland and Buffalo and hear what those utilities are up to. And so I'm going to actually bring some of this compact question to that group amongst others just to hear what their thoughts are. I know we are technically outside of the Great Lakes watershed because our water flows south through the Mississippi onto the Gulf of Mexico. But that doesn't mean that we as a state and like we as a people don't have ties to Lake Superior and to the Great Lakes as a whole. I just don't necessarily know where the water policy boundaries cut off on whether or not we actually are included in the compact or not.
Councilor?
Thank you. I think that's a great question, and we'll look forward to hearing the response to that as well. You know, and as I listen to your presentation, I too am thankful for the network that you're a part of and for the expansive thinking around this system and how this system can be a catalyst, a tool for not only considering equity advantages and disadvantages, but for catalyzing equity opportunity. As I listen to the work that you are considering and asking us about as partners, you know, I can't help but think of it in a greater systems way, and not just about this system, but about what kind of model you are creating that can translate to other systems that are infrastructure engagements for the Metropolitan Council. And so my questions aren't as much for you as for us, and for the council to consider the framework that we are building as we look at the 2040 and the 2050 regional development planning, and how we, for me, it's the test of how do we do this equity thing?
Yeah.
What do we do for water together with our communities, with our system partners, and with our community, and with even young people? How do we do this work of squeezing equity out of everything that we do? And then how do we apply that as we meet with you, as we think with you, as we hear back from you, to the roadmap that we're building, and how it customizes itself then for all other systems. So, this is to the members here, specifically also to our council members. How do we then use this as an opportunity for that kind of engagement of our muscle around equity? What does this mean as a pattern that we're taking to all of the systems work? And let's not just do this as a one-off, but how do we think about the partnerships that should exist, and the questions that we ask, and how we, on some kind of systematic basis, review this work and lift it up from platform to platform, year to year.
And actually, just to know, we actually have the infrastructure as I read it here. And that one of it is that we bypassed our reports from subcommittees right now because we don't have members on these advisories. We don't have enough members overall. And I look at the three, and one of them is transportation, the other one's operations, and affordable housing. Transportation, we have a very, very active advisory beyond the council members, behind the individuals. So where I would see it is just taking what we could do that's currently under operations and make it specific to water. And therefore, we would have our own advisory that it seemed like an interest for our members, but something that's not once a month, but maybe, at least our meeting and maybe the advisory meeting, so when they do come to us, we looked at that. And the equity committee here, if you look at it, looking at the 600 employees that you have, what percentage are diverse? And what are the people you hiring coming from an impacted neighborhood? And what does that look like? There's a number of things that we as an advisory have access to that could also look at it in a partnership with this here. So that's something I need to go back and talk about too. Because we're literally in the process right now of filling new advisories. We have to have our choices in by Friday. And so this is a good discussion I can have with the chair about what could happen with these three committees.
And Mr. Co-Chair also, I am curious to hear your thoughts. We wanted to come to you first just because we know that there's community ties that we want to make sure that we are coming early and in creating the relationship so we can continue to engage. And I guess Councilmember Carter, my question is, would it make sense also to maybe go to other committees within the council itself? I'm thinking the Environment Committee just because that's our go-to. But especially if we end up exploring Pillar 2 and thinking about infrastructure investments, for sure we will need to bring the Environment Committee along on this adventure as well. So it's a good thought, and we're just trying we can continue to make these connections.
Sorry, with you, Mr. Chair. I like the question, certainly the response from the chair regarding the committees that we have.
Yeah.
As you look at the subcommittees that we have, the thought about making change to operations makes sense. Parks and Rec, need somehow, or parks, I should say, from a county background. Parks need somehow to be there as well. And then on the point, so you'll be talking to the chair about that. I look forward to hearing back there. I feel as though this is a discussion, and I appreciate that you came to the Equity Committee first because this is the work that you are doing, but clearly there's operational aspects to it that Environment Committee will also be engaged, makes entire sense, and that there are connections between the other operational areas as well at the council that would involve water and the connection to water as a part of creating equity using all systems. But my sense of it is, and what I'm asking is that we create this discussion in the Environment Committee, and that we inform those systems actors of how, in fact, we are in connection with, of course, our staff leadership, anticipating this work of equity to unfold systematically across the board, so that it isn't one-off and we're having this discussion and it's between you and us, but we don't know how it's impacting the rest of the work at the Metropolitan Council. So I appreciate the questions that you're raising for us. This is a discussion about equity, and I think we have some ownership then to respond back to you, to say this is what we'd like to see, but also to hear from you, you know, how you think this work you're doing, the questions you're asking, the questions you're being asked by the network, you know, the information you're getting, how this impacts us as an organization, not just for water, you know, and so that's why I'm not pointing this just to you.
Yeah.
But what you're bringing back to us as a framework should add to everything that we do, so that, you know, our plan, the council's plan, your plan is all working together, and we can see how we're making that connection. So thank you. I apologize for talking so much, but sometimes I feel like if I don't say the words, you know, I can't possibly convey the idea, and then when I say the words, it's just far too much, and it may complicate the idea. But thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm curious about the pillars. You had them here, and did I hear you say that they want you to pick one of the 3 pillars?
Yes.
Okay, is it 1 or 2?
It's 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Is it 1 or 2?
Yeah.
We can pick 1 or 2.
We're gonna, again, it's thinking about where we have statutory authority, and where we can make the most effort, but acknowledging that, you know, every 3-legged stool needs 3 legs. So to these points, like all of these pillars are very important. And when we come to the point of trying to figure which one out we're gonna focus on, it's going to be a hard choice, because I wanna say yes, all 3.
Yeah.
But in order to get early wins and to get momentum behind this, we need to focus in one area and then grow the program so that we can ideally get to all 3 pillars.
Depending on which pillar you choose, or pillars will drive your goals.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The pillars, thank you, the pillars seem to be like a flow versus, you know, just targeting one of them. You know, you start with a climate analysis, you sort of look and say, what are we doing there? How does that drive the equal opportunity? And then that first pillar, that's there too. So it's like you almost have to do them in verse because of the urgency of the situation. Quite frankly, I recommend this across the whole council, is that on those 600 employees, on the contract procurement stuff that you're excited about, and that being a possibility, is that you go back and review, conduct an audit. How many of those are meet our guidelines for equity and are currently participating? And where there might be deficiencies, your goals are driven from that. You know, if we're talking about contract procurement, what are we doing? We're spending $117 million in that area. How much is that meeting or out there in diverse communities? And what do we need to do to make sure that we're achieving greater utilization of those diverse communities? So that kind of foundational information from you is probably going to be equally as helpful as what we can do in terms of guiding you to help you achieve improvement in those areas. So I would be interested in knowing, you know, what is the level of diversity in that 600 employee pool? What is the level of diversity in the use of those $117 million? And quite frankly, what role can you play in climate adaptation and mediation that is setting on us right now? I mean, we got a string of 90-degree days. I feel like I'm in Mississippi out there cutting grass right now. And And so I know things are changing, and that requires more water usage to be hydrated, or, you know, what impact does that have on our infrastructure? So I would look at it from that standpoint, but I think a solid review of those areas would help us a lot with providing input on ways you can go strategically to improve that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this was a great presentation. Thanks for bringing this to us. I think one of the homework pieces we could bring home is to mull over other grassroots partners that we could connect you with to help strengthen this work. And I would also offer that other communities you might want to bring this up to would be management, because if you know, depending on what other how binding this network is and what kinds of policy initiatives that might come out of it, if there are particular policy things that we might implement, it will definitely make sense to go before management committee. And then also one of the 3 task forces would be the climate change task force, because water, all issues of water, whether there's drought or no drought, also is impacted by climate change and with our powers over wastewater treatment and our pass-through power with funneling money through regional parks, and our long-range planning powers, we're not just stewards of the built environment, but we're stewards of the natural environment. And how we treat or mistreat the Mississippi here has consequences down in New Orleans, and so it's all related to climate change. And so definitely the climate task force and management committee would be important committees.
Thank you.
I just had a couple questions. How large is that network, and how often do you guys meet? And then also, I'm just really excited that you guys want to do outreach and bring in neighborhood organizations and so forth. And when you talk about employment opportunities, would it be for skilled individuals only, or entry level, or can anybody speak to that?
Yes, co-chair, thank you. I'll start with maybe speaking to the employment piece, if that's okay. Yes, so particularly in ES, and I was excited to hear you, Council Member McDonald, talk about like, what do those numbers look like? Because we know, because we do, I'm gonna turn over to Roderick, is it micro dialing down to look at very specifically what are our numbers in trades, skilled work, professional work, entry-level work, right? We really want to know. So yes, so opportunities across the board. We also are working on different trainee programs, right? So how can we work with folks who maybe are 18 or older, have a GED or high school diploma, and I don't know what it will be going forward, but about 5 years ago, one of the requirements was 6 months of verifiable work experience. Doing anything. We want to know that you know how to get up in the morning and show up and keep at it. And we can work with you. If you want to work with us, we will work with you. And then training through that. And that was amazing, because that was a plant operator job that started at that time. It was like $25 an hour to start with full benefits as a trainee. Then you're moving into a trainee too. It's a union job, so it's just it's beautiful and it's great. Family sustaining wage. So we do have some programs like this. This is an opportunity to look at what we have, revamp some things, build new things, build things in partnership with other divisions of the council, right? Because we know transit has wonderful programs and opportunities going on. The workforce and equity team that Roderick Southall and I keep pointing over here, and I work really closely with those groups in transit and others in human resources and regional administration at the council. So yes, opportunities, and I apologize, what was the first part of the question?
The network, how large?
How large is the network?
So
I believe it's over 20 cities now. Our map, I know I couldn't either. Our map is a little outdated. In Minnesota, we have the council, city of Bloomington, and I believe is it St. Paul.
Okay.
There's a map on the slides that will show, those are the not the new cohort, so our dot isn't on that map yet. I want to say this year they brought on 5 new organizations to join that cohort. So out of how many dots, just add 5 more.
Okay.
So I apologize not being able to.
35
We're just gonna
cities
take
and
a
20
couple more
states.
questions, because we need to get to one. Luckily, we don't have a legislative report, so we can move right into, to hear from Ashanti, but, is there any questions before we kind of go to the next?
Just suggested groups. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had your hand up.
I just quickly wanna in my head, when you were going through this, the 3 pillars had reminded me of the 5 green steps that a lot of cities. Okay, great.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So maybe connecting with like high energy groups. I know like St. Louis Park, their sustainability group they would pick this up, especially the equity lens portion of it. And then a lot of environmental sustainability commissions. I don't know if you guys probably already thought of all these. Oh, really?
I want to hear from you. Yep.
Great. And then like Three River District, I know they just did a presentation at a senior fair I was at. And I thought that's really groundworking to me. So
Yeah.
that would be all I could think of.
Thank you. And I will also just say, like, as we continue to, like, it's awesome to just start generating this list. We actually have another list that we're just trying to say, opportunities. These are good organizations we need to connect with. We also want to be mindful that we don't want to necessarily start too many relationships that we can't manage. Because that would be going back to the business as usual of becoming transactional, and we don't want that. So as we shape this program and as we hone in and understand a little bit more where we want to go within this program, that's where we'll circle back and again, just check with community organizations that might be more in alignment with this current direction, but not to say that we won't continue to think of different ways to work groups in. We just want to be mindful that we're not over-engaging or overextending our staff capacity.
You know, I think she clarified something. There is 2 emerging climate training groups from communities of color being sponsored by a group called the Public Policy Project.
Yeah.
Both, okay.
So, keep going.
But anyway, they are very active, engaged, and learning a lot about environmental things, and are at a point now where they want to start connecting and being some of the muscle around change that happens. But this sounds like something that would be a great natural step for them.
Yeah, the PPP was at the U.S. Water Alliance has a big conference that brings everyone together. This last year it was in Milwaukee, and so we actually got to meet some of our colleagues or members of our region in Milwaukee, and so we were starting to just share notes, and we're going to connect later this year to see how we can support each other.
Some interesting stuff going on in that city too, with the Freshwater Way and University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff happening.
But Extension Service, don't forget about them. They've got hundreds of years of history in this, and are doing some great stuff. So Extension would be excellent group.
Thank you so much.
Just lastly, the schools, I'm always excited about getting the youth excited. And they do have some good water programs for the youth now, and the county natural resources departments or units and their environmental services. They have that water resource fair that they do every year.
Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, I mean, that's 4-H.
I would love to have a badge that we design with the scouts that we do around water equity and conservation. Wouldn't that be amazing?
It has a little toilet right here.
Not just a toilet.
And then don't forget we have the north and south side green zones.
Yes. Yep.
And don't forget the Minnesota Science Museum. The Youth Science Center. Changing the world through science. Young people do amazing things.
And urban boat builders. It's beyond just the bolster building, but they got a lot of environmental stuff going there too.
But it's their future, so.
Springboard for the arts, public arts, and
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so
Thank you
much.
all so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Very good, thank
Great
you.
presentation.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the extra time also.
Yes, thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Well, we'll follow up with you, and again, there's some options that we can take to look at how we can partner here. So we have to be called, we could actually call it water without operations, or we can just take a look at what we could do.
Before you go, there's a process with at the wastewater plant, or I think it would be helpful if we all, I remember having the.
Do you
yeah.
want to take a tour?
Or just see how the process goes.
For sure.
And, with the sludge and the burn off and all that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we can
Oh, yeah.
definitely,
We can look you up.
do.
Oh, yeah. Right in our wheelhouse.
I get
We
excited
do
about
tours together all the time.
I took that 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
because I haven't
signed up yet.
Different plants, you can check out different levels of treatment.
All right, now we are just.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. We're just getting set up. I think that we just take a minute. I'll just give you a quick report. There was a lot of action at the legislature. We had a full report at the council. I've requested every full report here. It'll come to the next meeting. Won't be at this one here. Because I thought it was going to be something quick, but it actually has reached quite a bit of area. It was, without going into it, it was a very, very successful legislature for transportation, for the council, for the counties. I mean, so it was surprising. Yeah, they said that was the most successful council legislation they've had beyond everyone's expectations. But having said all that, I will put a quick summary together and send it out. But also we'll have the representative from our legislative lobbying team come and talk to us at the next meeting. I couldn't get it all scheduled right now. They've been they're doing the road tour on. All right.
John, quick question, while you're talking about the legislature, have they still discussing the positions for council members? Whether they're elected or selected or?
Yeah, that's, they're doing a study. So they've had one in the past too, but they have requested that there's a legislative committee put together made from public officials, community folks and others to take a look at this and return to the legislature next February to what their recommendations would be regarding the makeup. And the options are, there's so many of them, but anyway, they're to make the current structure and everything but elected members from each of these bodies here. The other one's that they keep the same number, but that they be local elected officials. See, one of the rubs for a lot of the folks were that we're not elected. And so it's taxation without representation, as they say. And so they're looking at what would that be then, what would be the alternative. And so having somebody who was elected, maybe a mayor or county commissioner or whatever, sit on this new body that they've been elected, maybe not on that certain platform or whatever. So again, there was, that every year it says, let's, get rid of it. But it's usually around 1 or 2 issues. When you get to the actual legislature voting on it, it's going, well, what do you replace it with? Yeah. And that's what the whole debate ended with. What would be different? Yes,
The other thing
Councilor
too,
Lee.
Anita, is, well, first of all, that particular piece didn't pass, but the other thing on the table is that we're looking at staggered terms, so that we have staggered terms so that an incoming governor doesn't fire all of us at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And I would tell you, again, 30 years ago, when I was appointed from Governor Perpich, I had to have my legislative members that were within my district make a recommendation. And so back then, you would have districts that were Republican or Democrat that were counter to the party itself, that the governor would put together a committee, and there was some consideration of the other party. At this point, it's all at one, and so to answer your question, it'll come back next year, and then whatever action will be taken then. On that same note, the districts, if you look at the website, the districts have been changed. I was council member from District 6, I am now 5. My district changed considerably. And what the fundamentals of remapping and redistricting is that they didn't want to put 2 of us in the same district, therefore having to go through another process. So it's trying to add everybody in there with the equal amount of people, like all redistricting works, but yet having done. So I have like an end of like a 394 and 169, I think it is, and I have Lake Nokomis and then the airport. So it's a real different map than what I was used to. But anyway, so what happened there is that we all had to apply last week. Today, the governor was getting feedback from legislators about our specific positions. Expects that he would make the approval this coming Friday, and therefore we would have the swearing in for all the officers in the coming next council, or some date in between there, something like that. But that's where. So again, I mean, you'll have to look at where every council member is right now.
Thanks for that update.
Yep. With that, we'll turn it over to our next presentation. It's on the affirmative action dashboard. Ashanti Payne, who's been before us a number of times and always provides some great insight. So, Mr. Payne.
Look at that.
That was just for us.
So soon, start talking.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Council and Committee members. Again, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And yes, I'm here to talk about our workforce and affirmative action dashboard. One of the things as I was listening over there to the conversation and the discussion about the workforce makeup in ES, and the one thing I thought of is that we can add to this dashboard that we don't, are zip codes. When you talked about, or somebody asked a question about, impacted areas where they're coming from. I don't want to speak too soon. I think that would be simple to do. I'm just going to say that. But good idea. It is a good idea. So I wrote that down to talk to our IS department about making that enhancement to our dashboard. The other questions, and I mentioned this when I gave a presentation on our affirmative action plan to the entire council was invited. I think in the 2 sessions we had about close to 500 people that attended. Is that environmental services is the widest division in the council. It's where we have the least amount of diversity within that division. So yes, that was kind of the emphasis behind some of those training programs and things that they're doing to improve, and they have made strides since our last affirmative action plan. So I want to mention that, of course, statutorily, we are required to submit our affirmative action plan every 2 years to MMB, and we are currently, we actually submitted our affirmative action plan last August. They have been filling positions at MMB, so they just now got around in May to review, provide their comments. We made adjustments, yes.
What is MMB?
I am so sorry. Minnesota Management and Budget. So they just got around to providing their comments, feedback. We made those adjustments. And so we'll finalize with signatures and do all the publishing with the state register, on our websites, etc. We also are required as part of that on a yearly basis to submit what's called an agency report, which covers personnel actions. Personnel actions which include new hires, promotions, transfers, layoffs, separations, discipline, those sorts of things. And then also all of our protected class harassment and discrimination complaints, as well as any lawsuits over that period. And that is due every year to Minnesota Management and Budget. With that said, this was launched a little over a year ago, which is our interactive affirmative action dashboard. It is currently available to all council employees. We have some plans to make this available on our external website so the public and everybody else can see our progress. It tracks our progress right now. As I stated, we're in the current 2-year period of 2022 to 2024.
So that's what we have right here, but if we wanted to go back and look and see, you know, where we were at in our 2022 plan, we can do that, and you see it updates the data instantly, so you can see that. And I'm gonna go back to 2024. I can barely see, and I don't have my glasses, but so it does break it down, of course, by EEO job code. EEO job code is just a group of like positions that are grouped together to, you know, so that we can compare our data to census data. And we can also disaggregate this by division. And let me just.
Division up right.
Up to the top on the right. Yeah, where it says all.
Go down to.
Oh, yes. No, I was trying to see some of the filtering data. But since we had environmental services here, I'm gonna pick on them.
Go ahead. They're gone.
Will you be giving us an overview of the council and then how you set goals and what those goals are?
Yeah, let me go back to that.
I know we don't have all night and
Yes.
you've got a lot of information, but I can't see it.
So this is how we track our goals for the council over this 2-year period. So, and you see here on the bottom, if we have a women percentage, if we have a goal, you'll see a percentage here, and then the percent of the goal towards how close we're getting to the goal.
And how did you set the goal?
Sure. The goal was set. We do what is an availability analysis, and the state requires kind of this 2-factor. So we looked historically in terms of how we fill positions internally versus externally, and then they're weighted. And then to calculate the availability based on the census, the availability in the job market, and our job market is the Twin Cities metro area. That's the one we chose. And then that percentage, if you are below that percentage, that's your goal. So whatever that availability number is, that's what you're trying to get to.
Okay.
If you're not there, is what you called underutilized.
So for each of these job categories, the percent of women in those job categories is the percent that is our goal.
Correct.
Okay.
And you can't tell, but probably because you can't see, but all these blue, right? We are underutilized for women across the board at the council.
So let me ask you a quick question, Mr. Chair, if I may. Are those just white women, or are those white women and women of color?
In this, it's women of color, but because we have to disaggregate this data for our federal affirmative action plan, I know that in the majority of the cases, it is white women. There are some categories where the women of color are underutilized, but the majority of it is white women. Now, again, you have to also, you also have to look at that into context as well, because we're in a region that is woefully underperforming, and even how you determine who's in the labor market and those sorts of things is a little skewed. So
we don't really know for sure if those are white women or women of color. We just combine both, right? And then women of color could also be under the people of color category there too. So we could be kind of double counting, or is there some way of disaggregating?
Yes, we do know, and actually we can break this down.
But there's no goal in people of color, and I was going to
exactly. That's the thing for our state plan. We don't disaggregate in that way. For our federal plan, we do disaggregate the data both by gender and race. So we do know.
So is this the federal plan or?
No, this is our state dashboard.
But I'm not sure if that's true though, because under Minnesota statute 43A, it says that that information should be disaggregated by protected group members, and then it defined members by each of the race categories, disability, and women. But these plans aggregate all people of color under this, so you can never discern how many African Americans are getting employed, how many Asians are getting employed, Latino, Native, because we've now grouped. So it's hard to tell in there if that 23% of the office administrators are, you know, who they are. Could that be all African American, or could it be all Asian? We really don't know. So, and the plan is designed to allow you to put in place a strategy for correcting any underutilization that exists.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, Madam Chair, committee members, actually, the plan, you are correct. However, we do disaggregate the data. We do track the goals for each of those categories. So just because the compliance or regulatory requirement doesn't require us to, we agree that it's important to do that, and we can get at that with this dashboard.
I would suggest that, you know, it would be helpful to see that, and you see better than I do, clearly, because you can ask better questions. But, you know, this is a lot of information. I'd love to see it broken down step by step so that we can follow along well with the information and also understand what you're required to track and report and what you're not required to track, but what you are, so that we know, you know, the baseline of information for the Metropolitan Council overall. This is really good. It's a lot. And my basic complaint is I cannot see it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
In the section, people of color percentage of goal down in skilled craft, 65.8%. What is that? That purple?
So this
right, yeah.
skilled craft is a category where we are underutilized across the board. So women, people of color, and persons with disabilities. So the purple means that for people of color, we are 65.8% complete towards our goal. So we still got 34.2% left to get to our goal. And then the same for women, we're only 29.2% towards our goal. So we're far way off.
Is that black women or Asian women or white women that we're down?
Well, this is all women, but if you want to see.
Okay, there you go.
You can get more.
Yes.
I'm just glad it's not like maintenance skills.
So here's where you can have it, where we have it actually disaggregated
there we go.
By each category. So, and then we can also go over here, like I said, and for each division, and if you click in here, just on black, you can see the region, men and women, for black men and women. So again, we track it because it's important to track, but in the official affirmative action state plan, we don't have a goal, but we do know where we're at.
I understand that, but I that's not following 43A, the statute. And maybe we should bring the statute here so that people don't get all upset at me because I raised that, but I also was the director of affirmative action for the city of St. Paul, and we had to follow that policy. And we published ours in St. Paul, I don't know if they do it today, by all of those protected group categories. So you could get it in the aggregate, but we also broke it down by race and gender. And because women are a protected group and disability is a protected group, and you're showing them, why not all of the other protected groups? Why are they being omitted? The theory behind that is if you can mask those groups in the aggregate, then the appointing authorities can appoint who they have a preference for. If they have a bugaboo about Black people, then they say, well, I just don't want them here, and I'll just get a person of color and report it as a person of color. So, but in order for us to even advise on equity matters and be able to navigate our communities where there's underutilization, it would be fair to me to know that there is an underutilization of African Americans or an underutilization of indigenous people, so that I can say, hey, here's a way we can go about increasing the pool of qualified individuals to get considered for the position. Not that they have an obligation to hire them. In some cases, they do, and further in equal opportunity, you do have that. So it's fine to present it like that if you want to, but I think the disaggregation of that is more in keeping with what the statutes say than to not do it. And I think once we get over that hump inside of all of these agencies, it's when we'll really make true progress. And not be naive that there are appointing authorities in positions that really are there to serve as barriers to opportunities for us. And if they're not, they would have no problems with those, that information being disaggregated. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Council Committee members, we agree with you, which is why we do track it at a disaggregated level. And I think I don't even disagree with your argument. However, I would say Minnesota Management and Budget has interpreted it in this way. And that's how they require us, not ask us, they require us to report it that way. But again, I think the larger and more important thing is that we feel that it is important to disaggregate it by race and gender, which is why we do it. We track our progress towards our goal. We track it by division, which is ultimately important, because if you look at a division like community development, there's 65% women. So even though as an agency we're underutilized for women, community development has a different strategy that we would employ for them. Again, Metro Transit, where we have most of our diversity. However, most of that diversity is in our operators. And even across the agency, if you look here at officials and administrators, Black men, we are underutilized, Black men, and not by a lot, but we're underutilized for Black men and women in our top level positions. And we could look at each of these across the board.
But there are also things in there to celebrate. You know, underprotective technicians, we're above what the benchmark is. And that's something to celebrate. But we wouldn't know that to celebrate that if it's under people of color. I mean, if you went to the other categories, there's probably tons of things to celebrate in here. It's just that, the agency needs some help with addressing where there is underutilization. And then that's where we start to point to sources in our community that can be alerted that there may be some opportunities at the Met Council for a Black person to be employed, and we get them activated and mobilizing qualified individuals to be considered for the position. Doesn't necessarily at the end of the day they get hired. Let me just tell you what previous administrators of MMB said to me about not reporting it, other than in the aggregate. It was about embarrassing their boss, the governor, because if they did it on a disaggregate basis, and they have to consider that, I understand that you're appointed by the governor and the numbers are low, you don't want that to reflect that on the governor. So they just group it all together. And that's what I heard from previous commissioners of MMB, when I was at the council and said, in order for us to get a true picture or compliance with the law, which we had an obligation to raise those concerns with them, they said, well, quite frankly, we don't want to embarrass the governor. And I accept that, but I'm glad we have this data because that was not the case 2 years ago. So that in itself is a huge progress, is that we have a dashboard now under Cerinthia's leadership that is actually collecting this information, and we now have it so that we, at least in the back room, can say, hey, here's some areas where we need to focus on alerting the community to get more qualified people in for these positions that come up.
Yeah.
Councilor Carter?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be brief, I really appreciate it. And when I complained, I didn't really mean that I was complaining, I just had bad eyes. But you have a lot of data, and it's incredible information. It's what's in your head about the data that I'm looking to see. What does it tell you? What are the key advantages and disadvantages? And what is it informing us to do? So it's the things that you just said that I really think are the highlights of your presentation, and clearly more, with respect to high-level positions, people of color, disabled folks in our area, what job classes, what departments and areas. And I realize these are things that can be embarrassing sometimes, but they're clear. We have the data. We can find the information. I can get my glasses. I can, get a magnifying glass and see it. What I really admire about this is what we call out that we can do. It's the things that you said, And so if I can ask anything regarding the ongoing work that we do together in the presentations that you bring forward, it would be to call out the stuff that we need to know and to put that on a slide for us so that we can see the work that you're doing and the goals that we're setting together in the council to address the areas of need. And also to show off where we're doing really well, because we know ourselves, we want other people to know us too, and to know what we're working on. I hope that doesn't go contrary to any policy direction that staff have received at the council. I would think we want to call ourselves out, because if we don't, others will. Yeah.
No, thank you for that feedback. I will be back next month and better prepared but I can really quickly, if we have time, to highlight some of those things that would come, because you can play around with this, and if you're like me, I don't know, and figure that out and how to filter the data. But one of the things we learned in our previous plan is women and people of color were leaving our organization at higher rates than they're represented. And this time around, we closed that gap. So we increased the number of people of color in our agency and women, and the rate that they're leaving lower. So that's some place where we're making progress. We also know that Black employees are leaving our agency, specifically in Metro Transit, at higher rates that would raise your eyebrow to kind of look at what's happening here. Mm-hmm. So we have put together some groups and committees that some of our team participate in, looking at the process, the recruitment, hiring, retention process all the way through, to kind of figure out where is it happening. Is it happening during probation? Is it happening, along somewhere else along the line? So
retirees,
right. So
bumping hiring, bumping business.
So looking at those things, and then retention is a big focus of our strategic plan that we have with HR. So we put together 11 key strategies that we've been working on in partnership with our HR department. They're coming back also next month, so we will have some of that information that you were talking about on some slides for us. And again, we have great diversity in Metro Transit and in some of our other divisions. But where our challenges are at those top levels and skilled craft. across the board. So, and just to note, skilled craft includes those union trades. So, which sometimes are a barrier to our communities in getting employed. So again, there's some strategies that we developed around skilled craft training. With Metro Transit, you heard about the stuff that's going on with ES. So we know where those call out things are. We've developed strategies. We'll have some real comprehensive stuff to bring to you.
Mr. Chair, on the retention matter, just to, when we've done these analyses, and it's not presented here, there are certain jobs that are temporary jobs. And in many agencies across the state, we saw that protected group members were being hired in temporary positions with the express thing, if you get through the temporary, we'll move you to permanent. But what we saw was they never reached that hurdle. They had them for 6 months or whatever it was in a temporary position, which I think the EEOC requires that in those job categories, you also list those hires in part-time and temporary positions. And that may be what's fueling the high retention rate, is that they're being tracked in there. They're only having them for temporary or part-time position for short duration, and then they're gone. And then you see elevated, they get counted in the whole numbers, but once they're gone, then that is reflected as a retention-related issue.
But it could be personal safety issues though too.
It could be that, but I think it would be helpful to us as an equity group to also see this information tracked for whatever part-time or temporary positions people are being hired, and to see what the numbers look like in those categories.
Councilor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ashanti, back to closing the retention gap. Is that because we're doing better exit interviews, or how are you closing the gap?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Councilmember Lee, we're doing a number of things. Not only exit interviews, but what we call stay interviews. So sometimes when you get the exit interviews, sometimes you're too late at that process. That person is either disgruntled or they're like out the door. And then also just with our employee engagement and efforts, making sure that individuals have a professional development plan, that they're engaged, that they know how their work contributes to the overall goal. Guidance for managers and supervisors in keeping their employees engaged. So there's a number of strategies that we think are worked on. Again, we group them by kind of in our plan. So retention, recruitment, and what are those strategies? Like I said, 11 strategies that we have. So those are some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Running right on time now. All right, well, thank you again. We look forward to you coming back again. You always provide some great data for us and our information. Just quickly, what software do we use for this? Do you know?
Power Platform and Power BI. I do know that. Even though I'm dangerous now. It's,
may not use it here, but I mean.
One of the things that I know a lot of agencies, including council, are getting away from kind of the Oracle reporting and those crystal reports and moving to what they call Power Platform. So Power BI, it's a reporting engine or tool. So yeah.
This kind of, the next item on our agenda, standing committees, and we usually have the council members that are present comment on either the committees they've been attending or where they're going. I'll start out today, actually bringing it all together, was this morning there was a workshop on workforce and contracting for our green line, I think it was.
Blue line
Blue
extension.
line.
That's why I'm dressed so nice today.
What's that?
I said, that's why I'm dressed so nice today. I presented there.
You want to tell the folks what it was, or I want to make it over there myself?
Sure. And I said this to, at our staff meeting today, is that we have a tremendous opportunity with Blue Line to really have some impacts and do something different as opposed to status quo, both in terms of workforce and small business. So even though it's, several years before the project, we are trying to get, we got an initial kind of get together outreach event with communities that are impacted by this project. Also had small businesses that are interested in working on the project, community-based organizations, our partners at Hennepin County, and we really talked about how we can strategize now. Now is the time to start planning for this project and the opportunities that this project will present for those impacted communities. So what have been historically the barriers to either workforce or small business participation on these large capital projects? What have been some of the best practices? And most importantly, what kind of information and feedback can we get from you in the community or also small businesses that we can incorporate, strategize around, and importantly, what can we legally incorporate into the contract to make it binding for these actions? So, to tell you the truth, I'm excited about this opportunity. I came to the council. Green Line was a couple years in, so I'm really excited about this opportunity to actually have some influence and impact on some of those outcomes.
All right, thank you. I'm excited as well. I mean, that and the anti-displacement work we've been doing, I mean, we're really spending the time out in the community. It's so tough. You start laying track, it's too late, so getting ahead of it now is great. Council member, Lee or Carter, is there anything you'd like to
For management, actually last week, Ashanti did kind of the inverse of this presentation for management, looking at the same issues of how we're doing with hiring, and so it was basically a higher level. I forget what the name of it was, your presentation, but it was basically another version of this, and so I think that was the more relevant presentation for the EAC. And then Tony and I just came out of the community development committee, and probably the most relevant thing there is our TBRA presentation today, the tax-based revitalization account. There's some cities and projects more funded, and we could always get more developers to partner with cities to apply for these grants, right? And if you have friends or people who are developers or trying to work with cities to have development projects, we can always diversify the pool of partners working with cities to apply for these grants. The whole LCA grants, all four of the different buckets. I think that's always kind of in the back of our minds when we hear these presentations at the very high level when we look at TBRA. So the TBRA account came up at the presentation today.
Yeah, and thank you. I was just gonna open up with that as well. It wasn't just TBRA, but our Livable Communities grants. We received an overview and then focused on the TBRA. We also looked at the list of grants that are being awarded during this period. How much was it? 2.1 million, yeah, something like that. And with the distribution that tapped out the larger cities at 1 million and made sure that there was coverage across the entire area. But a good set of projects that are coming through. And I too just wanted to also share that as we have Livable Community coming up now, I think July, the deadline is in July if there are projects that are ready to go either in the pre-planning phase or looking at bringing community together, doing input sessions, things of that sort. That's a kind of funding and support that Metropolitan Council provides through these strategies. And TBRA, the tax-based revitalization, is really for where there is remediation required. And so in areas of our metropolitan area where we have to do some work to clean up areas, I think that's TBRA, right? We provide the resources to do that. So you all just remember that I'm new on the Met Council, so when I keep asking, it's because I want confirmation. I don't think I had anything last week in particular besides our particular meeting.
Just one suggestion, Mr. Chair. We had the folks come in and give us a presentation on the homeownership program, pilot program. Can we have them back it's about a year later now, just to see the results of that and what's the next phase of that pilot project?
Okay, Ashanti.
Since I'm still in the hot seat, can I give some recognition or shout out for our council member? Councilmember Carter, and along with some other women were recognized by COMTO, which is the Committee of Minority Transportation Officials, as outstanding women moving transportation. And I've had the honor now to interact or work with 3 of the 4 women that were recognized last week. So
Thank you for noting that.
yes, very, very good event. So I just wanted to recognize our council member for that.
Thank you, and the recognition goes to the work that's being done here, represented.
I'd like to give a shout out too, because we've come a long way. You know, I'm just being honest, in the 2 years I've been in there, it seemed like a lifetime. But just getting these reports and the kind of stuff, you can feel and see that things are moving forward. And a lot of credit goes to Sarinthia and her leadership. And it's truly appreciated. I know that sometimes we can get long-winded and make people upset, but
I like the interaction.
Thank you, but I want to point out too, it is the work of all of us, and so Ashanti, we've got a new business analyst, Erin that's doing good work, IS has been wonderful in helping us with this work and going even deeper as well, so.
Thank you.
it's good. It's really good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, I like the interaction. We used to get information, and then somebody else would come and give us more information. And now, at least when we get the information, we can interact and ask questions and talk about it right then and there. It used to be send us an email.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah, send me an email and
so that's
you'll get a
changed a lot.
response.
It's a lot better.
It
Yeah.
is.
Well, it's good to
Give
hear.
recognition to our chairs also.
Oh, yeah.
For the support work that you've done.
Thank you. Well, with that, we have a whole 3 minutes to finish all that food.
And happy birthday again.
Yes, happy birthday.
Another agenda, the meeting's adjourned.
This is only the 20th.